Let's get started with our first piece of news. Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo both agree that Ilia Topuria should fight Islam Makhachev next. On their Pound for Pound podcast, Cejudo and Usman discussed Joe Rogan's recent comments regarding the possibility of Topuria fighting Makhachev for the lightweight title. Rogan had suggested that Ilia Topuria, who has been making waves in the featherweight division, should be next in line to challenge Makhachev. This sparked a lot of debate within the MMA community, with fans and analysts weighing in on whether Topuria is ready for such a big opportunity. Henry Cejudo, who is known for his analytical approach to fighting, acknowledged the well-known Dagestani mantra of anytime, anywhere, but pointed out that in reality, Islam Makhachev and other fighters from Dagestan expect opponents like Topuria to earn their shot first. Cejudo believes Ilia should face a top contender in the lightweight division before jumping into a title fight. He also expressed some doubts about Topuria's chances against Makhachev, admitting that the match would be a tough challenge. However, both Cejudo and Usman ultimately agreed with Joe Rogan's take, noting that after Topuria's victories over two pound-for-pound greats, Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett, he deserves the chance to fight for the title. They emphasized that Topuria's impressive resume of wins justifies a shot at the lightweight champion, setting the stage for what could be a blockbuster matchup between the two fighters. In addition to discussing the matchup itself, Henry Cejudo also gave some advice to Ilia Topuria on how to handle the build-up to the fight. He suggested that El Matador needs to change his approach when it comes to trash talk. According to Henry, Ilia should embrace a bad guy persona because he has the natural aura for it. Cejudo explained, "There were two first ballot Hall of Famers, bro, and I feel like Ilia deserves that, but it takes two to tangle. And I don't feel like these Dagestanis, bro, even though they say anytime, anywhere. It's like, Islam wants to make sure that Ilia deserves it. He wants him to go through the MO contender, as we talked about before." Cejudo added that while Islam may want Topuria to face another contender first, if given the choice, he would love to see Ilia challenge Makhachev next. Henry also encouraged Ilia to be more vocal in calling out Makhachev. He stated, "I think he needs to be more verbal about it, and really, he's been throwing little jabs here and there that he'll stop him, but I think he needs to stop being the nice guy. He doesn't have that nice guy aura. His aura should be more of that bad guy. I feel like that's where he can really cut a great promo and get people involved." Cejudo wrapped up his thoughts by agreeing with Joe Rogan's perspective. While he doesn't believe Ilia could beat Islam, Cejudo emphasized that the key to a great fight is simply the willingness to try. He concluded, "I would love to see that. Do I believe Ilia could beat Islam? But if you ain't trying, if you don't go out there and actually try, the key is actually trying. And this is weird, man, but the key is actually trying to attempt." Moving on to our second piece of news, let's talk about Merab Dvalishvili's thoughts on Dagestani fighters. Now, if anyone knows what it's like to face off against a fighter from Dagestan, it's Merab himself. The bantamweight champion recently came off a major victory over Umar Nurmagomedov, a fighter who had remained undefeated until he met Merab at UFC 311. The win was significant not only because it handed Umar his first career loss, but also because it helped Merab solidify his place as one of the top fighters in the division. That being said, Merab's perspective on Dagestani fighters is pretty interesting. While he acknowledges that the region produces elite competitors who excel in mixed martial arts, he's far from ready to elevate them to gods among men. In fact, Merab recently spoke candidly about his views on Dagestani fighters during an interview with Europop. He made it clear that despite their reputation, they are still just regular athletes. Dagestanis are really good fighters, Merab explained. They've always excelled in martial arts, but at the same time, they are ordinary people. Heavenly forces do not help them. They are ordinary athletes, and others can defeat them, as you saw in my case. This comment, of course, brings up an interesting point. Khabib Nurmagomedov is widely regarded as one of the greatest of all time, with an undefeated record, but Merab's statement challenges that narrative a bit. He claimed that while Khabib was undefeated, it wasn't necessarily because he faced the toughest competition. In Merab's eyes, Khabib simply did not meet a worthy opponent. That's a pretty bold claim, considering Khabib's resume includes wins over top fighters like Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje. It would certainly be interesting to hear how some of these fighters might respond to Merab's comments, especially someone like Dustin Poirier, who's faced some of the toughest competition in the UFC. What about Justin Gaethje or Conor McGregor? Would they agree with Merab's take that Khabib didn't face a worthy opponent, or would they disagree and argue that Khabib's reign speaks for itself? On a similar note, Ilia Topuria, the rising star in the featherweight division, was also asked about Dagestani fighters during a recent appearance on the Full Send podcast. Topuria, who's known for his striking and aggressive style, seemed to echo some of Merab's sentiments. According to Ilia, Dagestani fighters are front runners, meaning they thrive early in the fight but don't fare as well if things start to turn against them. He said, none of them have like a special cardio and special stamina, you know what I mean? If they fail in the first contact in the first round, but they can control you, it's very competitive, their head goes down. Topuria elaborated, explaining that Dagestani fighters typically try to dominate their opponents in the early rounds, pushing the pace and trying to break their will. But once that plan is disrupted, Topuria believes they often struggle in competitive fights. When they realize that it's not like that, most of the time, they lose that kind of fight. Like all the competitive fights, they lose all of them. This is a bold statement, especially when we're talking about someone like Islam Makhachev, who has shown exceptional cardio and control in his fights. Would most people agree with Ilia that Dagestani fighters fold when things get tough? It's hard to say, given how dominant Khabib and Makhachev have been, but one thing's for sure, Dagestan is a region with a long history of producing world-class fighters, with over 3 million people and many top-tier competitors hailing from there. So it's important to put things into perspective when making blanket statements. The real question here is whether or not Merab and Ilia's comments hold any weight. Do you agree with their assessments of Dagestani fighters? Or do you think their perspectives are too simplistic? Considering the accomplishments of fighters like Khabib and Makhachev, it's definitely a conversation worth having, especially given the dominance of Dagestani fighters in the UFC over the past decade. Moving on to another hot topic, Ilia Topuria has boldly claimed that Islam Makhachev is scared to fight him. Recently, Makhachev hasn't shown much interest in facing Topuria, and instead, he's been vocal about his desire to move up in weight and pursue challenges in higher divisions. According to Topuria, the real reason Makhachev isn't keen on fighting him is that the renowned lightweight champion is simply afraid to face him inside the cage. For quite some time now, both Makhachev and Topuria have hinted at moving up to different weight classes to seek titles in other divisions. In fact, Makhachev has gone as far as saying that he'd be open to fighting at middleweight, especially since his friend and teammate Bilal Muhammad holds the welterweight belt. However, when asked specifically about fighting Topuria, Makhachev has repeatedly brushed off the idea. He's claimed that he already has plenty of money, and beating Topuria wouldn't do much to enhance his legacy. Makhachev's reasoning is that he's already taken down the former featherweight king, Alexander Volkanovski, twice, so facing Topuria might not add much to his already impressive resume. This dismissal, however, has only fueled more speculation about his reluctance to engage with the dangerous featherweight.